Good day, my name is Tebogo Koma, and today we're going to get into the truth of what it is that causes such high levels of youth debt in South Africa. Now, of course, broke young people in debt is nothing new in the world, but what we have here in South Africa is worse. Now, today I have two young professionals who are really going to help us make sense of all this. However, the real conversation will remain incomplete without your valued contribution on the social media space. As such, we challenge you to go out there and tweet your view using the provided hashtags. We will, of course, select two random participants who will be our lucky winners for tweeting and engaging this conversation passionately on the social media spaces. Now, they will grab themselves a finance calculator courtesy of ABSIP University of Johannesburg student chapter and a full 1-year-long shopx.link subscription pass courtesy of shopx.link, who have helped us in sponsoring the event for today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this event is presented by ABSIP University of Johannesburg student chapter, the Human Council Civic Society and its partners. Now, on my right, I have Mr. Bonginkosi, who is a research psychologist focusing on research in the South African townships. He will help us understand the socio-economic context of this crisis of youth debt in South Africa. And on my left, I have Mr. Sandile Tukani, who is a financial professional focusing on data analysis. He will, of course, help us understand the financial aspects leading to youth debt in South Africa. Now, Kaiso, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, so let me introduce myself. My name is Bonginkosi. I am a master's student at the University of Witwatersrand. I'm registered for a master's in research psychology, and I focus largely on, in my current research, I focus largely on townships and the affective and discursive registers of townships. I will have to find a simpler way to say that.
Sandile, a bit about yourself.
Good day. My name is Sandile Tukani. I am 24 years of age, and I have background education in finance, economics, investment management, and accounting. And then I moved over to information technology, specifically software development, and I'm currently working in the space of data analytics within data science specifically. I'm one of the many young South Africans who are building and working hard to build a future for themselves, change their life story, and contribute something positive towards themselves, towards their families, and towards society generally.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Good day, everyone. I'm Bonginkosi Khalipha. I was born and raised in Ngobo rural communities in Eastern Cape, in a poverty-stricken community. I have a Bachelor of Accounting Science from the University of Johannesburg, and I'm currently pursuing my postgraduate diploma in Accounting Science with the Institute of Accounting Science here in Johannesburg. My other activities that I'm busy with, I'm running a farming enterprise back at home to fight against the greatest enemy of man, I guess, poverty, that has been ravaging the whole of South Africa. As we know that today, more than 50% of South Africans live in poverty. And that is very scary, very scary. That's why I'm busy with such projects where I can contribute with my skills and abilities. I believe in one principle that, which is a leadership principle, that a nation without a vision has a fuzzy future, and it is headed to a dead end. So the belief that I hold true to my heart is that wherever I am, I should bring the best of my abilities to fruition and help uplift the communities in which we grow up in and we live in. Thank you.
Now, in your own view, what do you believe contributes more to South African youth debt?
One of the reasons why the South African youth will so easily get into debt is because of a misconception on debt, right? We don't understand debt itself, what credit is, and how credit can affect our lives. We know it can impact our lives badly. We know it can impact our lives well, but we don't know the principles of debt, right? We don't know the different types of debt, bad debt, good debt, natural debt, neutral debt. So it's being able to figure out this and that and what you're doing. So if your debt, for instance, is debt that's going to actually improve your financial situation or improve your working conditions, then that's good debt because it's something that's going to help you. But if your first big debt is your dream car, then that debt does not serve you. It only serves you in the psychological, in the fact that it makes you feel good. It is some type of reward for yourself, but in the bigger schemes of things, it is actually a betrayal of yourself. So it's also historical. You must understand that our misunderstanding of debt is a historical issue, right? It's not like we are just ignorant, but black people have been kept away from participating in the economic sector or in learning in the economic sectors, and that has become, our knowledge access to understanding money and finances. So it's also not knowing. It's something that we still have to learn. It's going to take a while. There's also the idea of social culture, right? I want to introduce the idea of social culture because every society has a collective way in which they relate to money. Firstly, you must understand, you must understand that money is constructed. It's a human imagined construct. We attribute value to something because we think it has value. So every culture has its tradition based on the things that they value. And for black people, because most of our interaction with the world is surviving, that is how our social culture has evolved in how we understand money. In surviving, it is always hand to mouth, and it's short-term investments and all those things, and that's what we have tended to normalize as everyday, interactions with money. So I think in that regards, we need to really, really start talking about the cultural behavior we have with money, and is it serving us? Is it something we want to keep, or can we change that as a collective, but also as individuals?
I'd definitely say it's higher learning, education, specifically institutions of higher learning, tertiary education. A lot of us go through university, colleges, technical universities, and any other higher learning institutions without the funding for obvious reasons, for a lot of socio-economic factors. And a lot of us depend on financial aid, on bursaries, which is really not a huge portion of us who get those. So many of us end up taking loans, end up defaulting on payments, and we have to now go through that process of trying to make ends meet because we owe the university this huge amount of money. And even when you're done with your studies, you can't really do anything because you don't have access to your results or your transcript because of the amount that you owe. So that's part of the reason that a lot of us are in debt, especially those of us who are still pursuing our academic and professional desires. Now, with the phenomenon of black tax in South Africa and what I think it contributes, or whether I think it does contribute towards the huge youth debt in South Africa, definitely I do think that black tax does contribute. It may be through taking loans, through buying things on credit because you want to provide for a family, because that is the expectation that you have to provide. It doesn't matter how long you've been working or on the market, but as long as you start earning something, the expectation is that you have to provide and help at home. So a lot of young people end up, taking things on credit, taking things on loan, buying cars, buying furniture, getting involved in situations that are really, really unhealthy from a financial perspective, simply because they have to provide for their families. And that's part of what black tax does to the youth of South Africa. So it definitely does contribute towards increasing the amount of debt that a lot of young South Africans find themselves in.
South African youth is swimming in debt, mainly due to trying to pursue higher education that is very expensive and inaccessible due to funding that was not available until fees must fall in South Africa. So most people had either taken student loans or they were funded by the NSFAS, which was still a loan at the time until fees must fall in 2015. That is the greatest. That has been the greatest cause of of youth debt in the whole of South Africa, because there was no funding model that was allowing students access to education, which they wanted very much more than anything. South Africans are willing to study. They have taken these loans, student loans from the banks that they have to pay after they graduate, which take very long time to finish paying off. And then in paying those loans, they have to still continue to take more loans and live in debt to try to survive, because when they get to the workplace, they don't get paid enough to actually cover those loans and the lifestyle that they have to afford once they start working, because they are expected to live in a certain way. So, which is leading me to my next point of the second contributor to the debt that the youth is swimming in, is the lifestyle that they have to have in this country to try to live in accordance with with some certain biases, to try to impress certain people. And so in order to live that lifestyle, they have to live in debt so that they can afford buying those clothes, eating certain foods, not trying to build themselves and grow themselves. So that's the second greatest contributor, which is that they have to live a certain lifestyle, an expensive lifestyle, if you can call it that, which is they can't afford it, but they have to afford it if they want to be friends with that person who can afford it, if you know what I mean. That's kind of like peer pressure, but that's the environment, that's the society we live in. That's the second greatest contributor of the youth debt, which has to do with the income they earn, because the reason they can't afford, they earning much less, like income that is not enough for them to afford that lifestyle. There is very high rentals, so the standard of living is very high in South Africa. We know in the cities, of which that's where a lot of people are living. That's where life is happening. So they have to afford themselves that kind of a lifestyle, which is very expensive. So those are the two greatest contributors to the South African youth debt that they are carrying, and very hard to get rid of it from themselves. Thank you.
Now, to what extent does the non-exclusive South African phenomena of black tax contribute to such high levels of youth debt in South Africa?
The black tax that South Africans who are coming from impoverished backgrounds, who have to pay some form of additional tax to to take care of the rest of their families and the rest of their siblings is a heavy burden indeed. But I do not see it as something that would actually take someone into debt that cannot be managed, that is not manageable, because it only takes planning to actually, the lifestyle that the people who depend on that one breadwinner cannot be like the lifestyle of someone who works or who has a job living in the city, uh, having to work and live a certain lifestyle that they have to afford. So it's not that heavy, such a burden that um, it can actually put someone in too much debt that they cannot survive without it. So it's not a big contributor in my opinion. That's what I think. I don't view it as the biggest contributor. So people shouldn't blame that when they cannot manage their debt. It's part of their responsibility to take care of siblings. We know that's the spirit of Ubuntu. Yeah, we understand that the income is not enough, but black tax is not the main reason that people are swimming in debt. Thank you.
I think we have to stop calling it black tax. For me, I'm not happy with the term black tax because it sounds like a phenomenon that black people have created and have taken responsibility for, but it is actually a response to poverty. So this is, I think we'd rather call it a poverty-induced financial obligation, right? I know it's long, but it's a poverty-induced financial obligation. You take care of people at home because you need to, because if you don't, people will actually suffer. Like, there's no mystical way to say it. People will actually suffer if you don't do anything or help. So I think calling it black tax sort of takes away parts of the system that that induce this type of behavior and this type of behavior in us with money. But yeah, there's an element in which all of these things intertwine and work together to create a fully dysfunctional person when interacting with money.
Do you view insurance companies as taking advantage of the situation in South Africa?
I think really big corporations, huge businesses that are usually monopolies or oligopolies in their industries tend to take advantage of social ills. They tend to take advantage of social problems such as inequality by sort of creating products or providing services that perpetuate the status quo. They would either create a product that promises a solution to those who are perhaps to young people, a solution to help them get out of the debt, or a solution to help them plan their financial future or get out of financial bondage. Wherein in that same breath, they're actually profiting from that. So they take the problems of society and actually create products out of them and actually milk whatever remains of the economic power of the young people in the country. Or they either foster a more unequal society by providing, specialized products and services to those who have, neglecting the have-nots. So it is indeed true that these big corporations, I don't think just a small insurance company that's trying to make their ends meet will be able to take advantage fully of this situation, but I think a big oligopolic company or monopolistic corporation in the insurance industry, I'm not going to mention names, they definitely have an advantage. They can take an advantage of young people in the position in which where they are heavily indebted, so they can create products that promise the way out. They can create a product that promises to give young South Africans a future, perhaps, or maybe free them from financial bondage.
From the perspective of insurance companies, I don't view them as taking advantage of the situation to actually bring more burden to their clients or their consumers, as we would call them, as they call them. Um, as it is business. To them, it's business. And in a capitalist society, every problem is a business. That's what it's all about. So that's how I view the insurance companies that would be doing any work around the debt issue of the youth. So that's my view. So my view is that they they I wouldn't say they take advantage. I would say they are taking, because business is about taking the problem that exists and turning it into your own opportunity. So capitalism is all about that. You see what can you do to capitalize for yourself, which is what I would view those businesses are doing. Like any other business, all the different industries, every capitalist is doing that. They find a problem and they see how they can make money from that. Thank you.
Now in South Africa, we have a long history of investment clubs called stokvels. So in your own opinion, how effective do you believe are the stokvels in eliminating debt among the youth in South Africa?
Stokvels are a bit of a touchy subject, because stokvels they're not working. They are not using the best methods to invest money, and the investment methods are usually short-term. Of course, there have been people who have tried to expand stokvels and make them a little bit more useful and meaningful, but those are very few people. And but stokvels, no, they are actually, banks are eating off of stokvels. The myth is, the idea of the myth is that stokvels are unique constructions of black people. No, there have been investment clubs for centuries now, and people have gotten together to invest at both at short-term, medium-term, and long-term for the benefit of, a large group of people. And the difference with stokvel is that stokvels are largely short-term. So, and they benefit the banks more than they benefit the individual. So you put a lot of money in a bank in a bare minimum saving, interest 3.85, sounds good, but I'm sure you could make a lot more if you had settled on a way to invest it in much better places. So yeah, stokvels, I think it's just a conversation of starting to understand the stock market and starting to understand how that money can be used to grow much better, or to actually solve financial problems for large groups of people at one time. The other problem that I think I've stated is that they are only short-term. Stokvels are always short-term interventions, and that does not eradicate the situation. It merely manages it. So if we're looking for a way in which we want to eradicate the situations, then we'd have to talk more medium to long-term investment for a lot of people.
Stokvels, firstly, are usually carried out by the older generation, older people. Young South Africans don't usually get involved with stokvels, and stokvels do not focus more on investing. They actually focus more on keeping the money. So they would source funds together, crowdfund, and then keep the funds, which obviously results in depreciation because of inflation. So actually, stokvels do not necessarily promote a culture of investing, but rather, in a way, interestingly so, a culture of spending, because a lot of stokvels at the end of the year of whatever their financial period is, they spend the money. So I don't think stokvels are actually helping in eliminating the problem of youth indebtedness in this country.
Now, are the costs associated with marriage, lobola, or divorce for that matter, in South Africa, do they induce debt among the youth in South Africa?
Divorce can induce debt to the young people, because once there is that broken family, divided family, the young people have to find their own way in this life, and it's very tough. And as that is the case, they have to live often on borrowed funds, borrowing from friends, borrowing from the financial institutions if they can they qualify. And if they qualify a lot, they can find themselves not managing to pay off that debt. So it is one of the contributors to the youth debt that South African youth is having. Because if the family is divided, usually there is generally to the our families, there is one person who is a provider. So if the family is divided, chances are that you will find yourself in a situation much worse than you were when the family was together, because the money has to be divided now. So now you have to try to find your own way, which is not very easy to do, very difficult, because you don't have that third generation money that is inheritance in most of the families. So you end up struggling and having to find ways to quickly qualify for financial institutions and live in debt to actually afford your lifestyle. Thank
Now, this generation is purported to be the most sad generation. How does debt contribute to high rates of depression among youth?
You know, when you're at an age where you know you should be able to provide for yourself financially, and you find yourself unable to provide for oneself financially, you will probably be depressed, especially when you see other peers, perhaps in other countries or in other racial groups, especially here in South Africa, because poverty here also is directly related to what race you come from, for very obvious reasons. So it does contribute to an unhealthy level of toxicity in one's mentality when one notices that they're actually unable to provide for themselves, they're unable to provide for their children, should they have babies at that time, or what their baby or their family, their parents or their significant other. And being unable to provide for yourself at an age where you should be able to provide for yourself does definitely lead to a level of toxicity and negativity.
Depression and debt in youth. I would agree that it really does contribute a lot on that. There is a lot of contribution that comes because of the debt that the youth is facing. So, because now you start, if you having a lot of debt and you can't afford to pay it, you will begin to owe a lot of people, your friends will go away, your family will go away, people will desert you, you will be rejected and disowned because of how you live with your finances. So it does cause depression, because you begin to realize that, okay, you begin to say people hate you, but people don't hate you, they hate your financial habits, which is how you deal with your finances, which is why you got into debt in the first place. If we try to come to reality with it. Now that will bring depression to you, because you think people don't like you. It's not that people don't like you. Once you manage your finances well, then your friends will like to be around you. It's just that they don't like to be around someone who is always borrowing to pay another lender. Then those relationships get broken and it doesn't end well there. Then you can be very depressed and live a very sad life. But life should be fun, so we shouldn't allow those habits to build up, and we allow those situations to conquer us. So that's my view on debt and depression.
Now let's talk about the poverty life cycle and debt. What correlation is there between them, if any exists, and how can the South African youth break this cycle of poverty, and how can they pull themselves out of these huge, insurmountable levels of debt?
Remember, most of us come from, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, even more generations of people who've lived in extreme poverty. Even if, some of us are barely holding on to pseudo middle classness or whatever you want to call it, and that is the best that has ever happened in our family. So the understanding of money is very little. The natural understanding of money is very little. So what I mean by natural understanding is that because money is a construct, right? It's something you construct, and then when you construct it, you manage the culture around it as a collective. We have not had that opportunity because we have not engaged with money beyond the idea of surviving. That is why many of the first generation sportsmen in South Africa have failed dismally to keep money. Even now, it's still a very big problem within the sporting field that sportsmen who are coming from particular background will always be broke, because there's a culture that he's adhering to, that they are adhering to in terms of the way they spend money, that is going to betray them at the end. So you have to know your access to money and your understanding of money. I would always suggest to see a professional, get a professional financial advisor, get a counselor, go through your traumas with money, your traumas with poverty, and try to sort those things out, because if you do not, you will believe that you will buy yourself the healing, and it is impossible. You can't do it. You will suffer trying to make things better. So it's always advisable to see someone who can help you in that regard, and always see a financial advisor who is much more trained than you are to help you handle your finances.
Poverty life cycle and debt correlation. So it is very sad that to break the poverty life cycle is very hard to break. It's very hard to break, because it may mean that you are using the wrong means to try to keep that poverty cycle existing at the level that it is at. And for you to actually to break it will require you to actually pay off that debt and then start from scratch without the debt, which is very difficult. So I think the high levels of debt are highly correlated with the poverty cycle, because the people who live in those circumstances, if they find it very hard to break out from them, then they have to live through with the sharks, having their bank cards or SASA cards or whatever their income comes from, staying with the sharks. And even if the sharks are the official ones, the financial institutions, because at 12 o'clock, you wake up and your money is not in your bank account. So your card stays with them, because they will take it before you even touch it. So then it's very hard for you to actually break out of that cycle, because now you have found yourself in a situation where your lifestyle is there because of the leverage that was created by the financial institution or the mashonisa that you take the money from. Now, every time your income comes, you have to go back to zero and then go back to the financial institution or the mashonisa to actually cover you up, because now you will remain naked and your lifestyle will go away. That's very hard to break, and it means disaster. It means disaster. So for many people, it means like it can take you to very harsh conditions to actually live that lifestyle whereby you live because you are supported by debt. And then dropping that debt means you are dropping your lifestyle. That's not an easy thing to do. And that means you have to sacrifice to actually drop that lifestyle in order to bring it up at a very high level, leaving that debt far below you and not even living according to that debt. And that requires some courage to do. So what I'm saying is that the poverty life cycle is very hard to break, where it is the poverty life cycle is kept going by the existence of that debt leverage that is keeping that lifestyle you have found yourself in. To get out of that lifestyle, you have to sacrifice something, and that means you'll go down in your lifestyle, and then you have to pick yourself up because you have to let go of those things that you can only do because of debt and start doing things with the real income that is yours. Yeah, that's the view. Thank you.
Now let's talk about student debt in South Africa. What are its causes and how can it be fixed?
The thing about student debt is that it's tricky. It's a political question. It's a question of political will and how we view education. South Africa is one of the most uncritical countries in the world. The idea of the country being undeveloped has not clicked, that actually what you need to do is develop the country. And for some reason, we are waiting for the economy to be better before we develop the country. And that is our joke. And it's the fact that we have not valued education enough to try and get the situation in a way that would benefit everyone involved in the country, all stakeholders. For some reason, we don't believe that if education is better for everyone, it would be better for the whole country. Because we are such a highly racialized country, all aspects of reasoning have to go through racialized logic, and which then betrays the very same economic goals that the country is trying to reach. It is an interesting phenomenon, but it is one that South Africa wrestles with. And South Africa has a very healthy bank sheet if we were to look at the numbers. And if they wanted to afford education, they could afford. If they wanted to afford free education to everyone, they could afford free education to everyone. And my intervention is that it doesn't have to be an absolute solution. It just has to be better than what it is now. We have to find a gap in reducing the ways in which financially people are excluded from participating academically, and also the way in which education is shaped in South Africa does not serve the needs of South Africa. So it's a very funny betrayal of itself. South Africa betrays itself in so many different ways. In the very same breath of development conversations is these racialized ideas of who deserves what, who doesn't deserve what, these genderized ideas of who deserves what, who doesn't deserve what, that do absolutely nothing except confirm certain identities. And it is one of those things that matter in the metaphysical, but if we were to actually want to make a difference, those would be the first things that we'd have to attend to. Education, access to education, quality of education. South Africa has a very, very low quality of education, and it is an avoided topic all round.
The greatest cause of student debt is the hunger for human development, education. That is the greatest cause, because specifically in South Africa, sorry, there has been no funding for students who could not afford higher education, and the only way was to go to the financial institutions and get a surety. And if you cannot find a surety who can take debt on your behalf, then you couldn't even get that debt. So that is the cause. The cause is the poor economic conditions in which we grow up in these communities, of which our parents cannot afford to pay for us in the education, and the government had taken a step back and watched us what we were going to do with ourselves until the enforcement that came through Fees Must Fall in 2015 that gave some room to actually turn NSFAS into a form of a bursary that students no longer have to pay back. Therefore, that is the main cause, is the hunger for education. And we know that in the 21st century, you cannot live without education. That is why we fight so hard to get it and getting that student debt. It's very hard, because our families, sometimes even if they can afford, there are family conflicts. So those contribute to the student debt that we end up carrying, because someone can afford to pay for you, or even take as a debt on their own name and assist you. They can't, because maybe there is a family conflict. So those are all the poor economic conditions that specifically Black South Africans live under. So that makes it a very difficult situation, which is forcing the youth to go and take student debt and try to access this education that they hunger for it. They are eager to get. So that is the main reason. Student debt can be remedied. It can be mitigated. The first form of that would be, the government has to step up and come with plans to make sure that the youth who need to go to university can access that education without issues, and have it for free from financially needy families. Financially needy students need to have free access to education. So that's the only way the nation can grow, because those people who have learned from those universities, now they can go back to those communities and build the economies, build businesses, and the economies can start growing. And then over time, the government would find itself stepping back, no longer having to have the burden of paying for students, because the communities can afford. It is impossible for rural communities and the townships that we see in South Africa, people living in shacks, and those people in the huts in rural communities of South Africa, that we expect those people to afford to pay for their children in university, when they cannot afford monthly groceries for themselves. They live in less than 1,000 rand a month in those households. How would we expect those people to actually afford higher education? They cannot, which is very expensive. So those are the causes, and it can be remedied. The key stakeholder that can take that away is the state. The state has to come forward for its communities and do something that is really valuable. They have done very well with the public education, that students, even in those poor communities, don't have to pay some money to access education. So that is the situation that we would like to get with higher education as well. Then it can be relieved from students, then can have that burden removed by the government. Other than that, other stakeholders and the companies, the second part of them is the companies. Companies have to stop taking the easy way out, because they know that students will have to work for them because they want the money and to survive. But the companies have to actually offer bursaries to people who deserve, who have financial need. But what the South African companies specifically are doing, they give funding to people who earn high grades, not necessarily people who have been accepted into the programs at universities. So that is that hierarchy that is used by the South African companies. It is not helpful. It is not healthy for to actually uplift the youth, South African youth, from the poor conditions in which they will grow up into the lifestyle that they can have if they have access to education. So this easy way out the South African companies are having by taking the people who earn high marks, not necessarily people who have been accepted into the program, who do not afford the funding to go into those programs. They have to stop doing that and actually afford funding to the people who need it most, not to the people who actually have 10 companies chasing them saying, can you please take my own bursary? Because that's what happens with the students who are from the modest schools. But that's what the South African companies are doing. They do not take into account the demographics of this country and offer funding to the people who are from the rural communities. Obvious, people from the rural communities and the townships will not have those high marks, the distinctions, but they still have access and they afford, they have been given opportunity to do the bachelor's degrees at university. But where are you, companies of South Africa? So the corporate South Africa has to come to the fore and actually bring the funding to the needy students. Actually, they should have a policy whereby 75% of the funding goes to the financial needy students, not to the students who can afford, because usually 90% of the students who have high grades are from families who can actually afford. Why would you give funding to someone who has, why would you give funding to someone whose mother is a teacher versus someone whose mother is a domestic employee in someone's household who earns 2,000 a month versus the student whose parent can even afford the student loan, not even a student loan, they can take it on their own name and cover that gap and take their child to university. This is creating the inequality that we see in South Africa. We don't want that. So South African, the corporate South Africa has to come to the front and issue and bring a different solution, which is looking from a different perspective, which is that no more giving funding to where it belongs. The Matthew effect, which is that the Matthew effect, which says that to who has a small thing, even that small thing will be taken, and the one who already has will be given more. That's exactly what the South African corporate is doing. It's giving more to the person who already has, rather than the person who is living with the grandmother back then in the deep rural communities in Eastern Cape, who has no way of accessing the funding because they were starting with a candle and they had to take care of their grandmother there and couldn't do all of their work. But now you give funding to a person who already has access, who already has a social capital because of their surroundings and all of those things. So I appeal to the South African corporate South Africa to come to the front and offer different solutions for funding students who will, in the end, work in those firms and actually make them and contribute in developing the economy of South Africa. Thank you.
Now let's talk about internships and graduate programs in South Africa. Are they exploitative? And how are they affecting the youth in terms of student debt and youth debt in general?
There will be two sides to this one. The two sides are that the internships and those apprentices and all these kinds of programs that big companies have for youth, they can be very good. First of all, they allow you to have access to a wider network than where you currently live if you don't have a job. So now you have access to a wider network. You can create connections that can work for you in the future. That's very good. So that's the good side we are looking at. And in terms of them being exploitative and paying very little and all of that, Uh, I don't think that there isn't much effect on that. They would affect the youth negatively because they have higher expectations that I want to be paid more. But the main purpose of an internship, of an apprenticeship, or whatever you are doing that is not pure a job, you are not there for the money. You are purely there to learn. If the youth can shift their attention to learning in an internship rather than the income they get from the internship, then it can have a very positive effect. Because if you work very hard in that internship and contribute to the company and show your interest and keep developing yourself in other areas to bring more value to the company, at the end of the day, when the internship ends, your manager or your facilitator will not let you go. You create that for yourself by bringing all you can to the table and more. All you can and more. That's what you do when you get an opportunity to some access to the value chain of life. Because that's what an internship does. It's not giving you a job. If you let that internship go without you having made a name for yourself, then you will regret internships and you will blame them and look at the exploitative side of them. Yes, they do not pay enough. That's okay if you are looking to learn and create those relationships that you can later use. Because what you have to focus on in life, it's all about connections. Internships provide that opportunity for youth. That should be the great impact that an internship has in the life of a young person. If the young person is looking at an internship as something that should give them enough finances to live the life they want, then it's not an internship anymore. So that's the purpose of an internship, because it's to actually develop the young person and actually give them an opportunity to learn certain things and give them that access to the wider network of life, which is the working class. So that's what an internship seeks to achieve. I hope that contributes greater value. That's my perspective on internships. The stipend or the money they pay is irrelevant, because your purpose with an internship is to learn and grow yourself and actually create relationships that will work for you. Thank you. Now, this is a great question. At what age should a South African youth be financially stable? I was asking this question to my sister, and I was asking it as a rhetorical question, because the answer that I'm bringing to this platform today is that at a very young age, like as soon as you learn that you can take some coin and buy some sweets, then you should be financially stable by that time, because whose money are you going to keep using to buy those things that you like now? So that's supposed to be a joke. So the reasonable age, by the time that someone leaves school, which is by the time they matriculate, they should actually be aware of how to create their financial situation to be working for them. Which means by the time you go to varsity, whereby you will be having allowances, you should be able to, by that time, you should be applying true financial principles that work for you, beginning to know that money comes in your money should be distributed in three different forms, which are as follows. The income you get should be distributed to spending, savings, and investment. You should never have income that is always going to spending. Even if you earn a stipend, whether it's 1,000 rand or 500 rand, it doesn't matter how much you earn. What matters is what you do with that money. Now we know that majority of the people generally in the world, they don't know, they haven't been exposed to financial education. And that is the biggest problem when it comes to finances. Because now you get some income, and the only thing society has taught you is that money is for spending. That's not true. Money is for three different purposes: investing, spending, and savings. When you earn a little income, I understand it that majority of your income will go to spending. And you will even say, I don't even have enough I can't even invest anything, I can't even save anything. That's not true. It takes commitment to do that. It's your choice. If you put away 10% of your money, of your 1,000 rand per month, that will be something at the end of the year. And it's about the habit, developing the financial habits that will work for you. So that is the biggest problem when it comes to the stability of what age should they be stable. If by the time they leave high school, then they have learned about the financial principles that work for an individual, then they can do better, because it's not about how much you earn. Like I said earlier, it's about how much you save, invest, and spend. Money is not for spending. Money is for three different purposes, like I said earlier. You have to distribute your money according to three different streams. That's how you will begin to create your personal finances that work for you. You should know that your life shall not depend on financial institutions, on being financed by outsiders. That is so. To try to answer this question of saying what age should they be stable, by the stability, for me, I call it financial freedom. It's about understanding what you do with money, not how much you are earning, not the income you get. I don't care about the income you get. You can be having no income and become the richest man on earth, because it's not about the income. It's about what you can do with the money that is given to you. So that's a far-fetched example that you can be the richest man, but you can be, because you know that you only work with investments. So you don't need income. You need to be bringing value to the world. And if you bring value to the world, money will be brought to you. You don't have to worry about that. So that's a side principle. The key principle about money: watch what you do with the money that comes to your hand. Even if it's 100 rand, that's what will change your life. That's what will bring stability, not the age that you are at. We can say, yeah, it's maybe when you are 15, maybe when you are 30. There is no age. The age that you become financially stable is the age that you understand that money is not about what you earn, it's about what you do with what you earn. Do you spend a portion? Do you spend a portion? Do you invest a portion? Do you save a portion? If you live like that, those investments will begin to grow and begin, because it's like seeds. Those seeds keep reinvesting and going back to the ground it's like reinvestments. Then it just keeps growing. And at some point, your investments, you will get to a point where you have income that is greater than what you spend your money on. Now you invest more than you spend, you save more than you spend. That should be your goal. Then if you can achieve that, where you save and invest more than you spend, then you have achieved financial freedom. That's how you would say, now I'm financially stable. Because stability will not come by some magic. It will come by applying true financial principles that work for personal finances. And that should be taught in school, by the way. Thank you.
Bonginkosi Sandile Tukani, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. And thanks to the viewers out there and all those who tweeted and engaged this conversation on the social media spaces. Now, of course, we will be announcing our winners, courtesy of ABSIP UJ and Showbox.link, and we will announce them on the social media platforms.